Hi folks, Sty North here. Time for a Sty story. Now, this one, um, I leave it totally up to you. Um, it's it's got a little bit of harshness to it. This story, so um, you might want a little bit of front end warning, a little bit of viewer discretion, because it does involve. This story does involve the killing of an animal. So um, if you have small children that like to watch my channel, this might not be a video that you want them to watch. So watch it first and decide whether you want your children to hear this story or not. But this is a story I wanted to throw out there for folks that may be interested in it. Um, well, this story goes back to the late 1970s. Um, a fellow that I worked with, he had a deer shack up in northern Minnesota. Uh, I believe he had 80 acres of property there, and on that property he had a big one-room deer shack that they had built out of scrap lumber, and eventually it turned into a cottage, and basically it's typical northern Minnesota deer shack. So him and his brother and their buddies would go up there and deer hunt every year. Well, he asked me to go up there with him for a weekend, long weekend. I think we were going to be there 4 days, 3 nights, and help him do some remodeling to his shack. And I said, sure, I'll go with. And we got up to his shack, and that was the first time I had seen it. And that shack was quite remote. It was quite remote. Um, the road into his shack, it's about 2.5 miles long, and it was nothing more than a wagon trail through the woods. It was pretty rough getting in there, but he had it set up pretty nice. And what he would do is he'd haul 100-pound cylinders of propane in to run the stove and oven and the propane lights. He had propane lights in the place. Um, and I was surprised the shack was pretty nice. And what he wanted to do that weekend was panel the shack, put paneling on the inside of the shack. And I said, well, okay. So we're up there a couple of days and we're paneling the shack. And we got to telling stories. And so I I was working on one side of the shack on the interior, and there was a big red area. It looked like something smeared about 3 feet off the floor. And I said, Chuck, what's that? What is that on the wall, that red stuff? He goes, oh, that's blood. I said, what? What do you mean that's blood? He goes, yeah, that's blood. He said, I'll tell you a story. He said, the that spring, now this was like in July that we were up there. He says that spring he had gone up there with his wife, his daughter, and his son, his young boy. His son was about 6 or 7 years old. And now Chuck always had a gun handy, always had a gun around the place. It was always within reach and loaded, ready to lock and load and use. So he said that their first night up there, he said his wife wasn't much for the shack. The kids loved it, but she wasn't much for it. Well, like I said, it's one big room and it's got bunks in it. And his son is in a lower bunk across the room from where him and his wife were sleeping in this large, full-size bunk on the opposite side of the room. Well, in the middle of the night, he heard this funny sound, and he realized it sounded like somebody gasping for breath. And he said he rolled over, and there's just enough light in the room that he could make things out quite well. Well, he looked across the room, and his son is laying on his back, and on his chest is a fully mature fisher. Now, if you don't know what a fisher is, right now, I'm going to pop a picture of a fisher up on the screen. There. Now, that's a fisher. That was on this boy's chest. It's on his chest, and it's looking that kid right in the face. And it's snarling at this sleeping kid. The kid's asleep, but the kid's breathing heavy because of the weight of that fisher. Now, a mature male fisher, it was a male, a mature male fisher will be about 3 feet long from nose to tail, end of tail, and they weigh anywhere from 8 to 12, 13 pounds. Now this young boy having that big fisher on his chest is sound asleep, but he's laboring breathing, and he's going to wake up any moment. Well, Chuck didn't know what in the world to do, and he reached, and underneath his bunk was his rifle. And he pulled his rifle out, and it was a bolt action Remington, I think it was a Remington 270, good flat shooting gun, with iron sights, no scope. He pulls that gun out, and just as he's raising it up to get a bead on that fisher that's sitting on his son's chest, just as he's getting a bead on that fisher, the fisher turns and looks at him. And he figured, well, that'll scare it off. Now, fishers have a lot of claws. I mean, really sharp claws. If that thing would have ran off of that kid, he probably would have tore him up a little bit trying to get off of him, because the kid's just sleeping in pajamas. Well, when the fisher turned, the kid started to wake up. And Chuck told me all he could think of was, don't wake up now. And that fisher turned and growled, put his head down and growled in that kid's face. And Chuck said that under his breath, he said, no, you don't. And he said the fisher sat straight up, and he squeezed, and he hit the fisher in the head, killed it. Splattered it against that wall. And he said, that kid was so wore out and tired from running around playing all day, hard and healthy, typical young boy. And he was so wore out and tired that the gunshot didn't frighten the kid. He said the kid rolled over and faced him, and he goes, Dad, what are you shooting at? And Chuck said that his wife knocked him right out of the bed, came flying out of it. She didn't know any of this was going on. She come flying right out of that bed, and she's looking around, and she saw the blood mark on the wall, and her boy sitting up in the bed, and Chuck said the rest of the trip went downhill real quick. And now I do know that he's taken his boy and his daughter back to deer camp over the years. But from what I understand, his wife, she told me, she's never been back. She said she doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to know what goes on there. She doesn't want to ever experience camp again. You would think it would be the kid that would be traumatized, but the kid himself, he loves to tell the story, even though he slept through it. I love to tell the story, even though I wasn't there. So I got the story secondhand in a sense. Well, I got it right from the horse's mouth, right from the shooter's mouth. Um, but I like to share that one with folks. So there you go. Don't wake up now. Now I will add, a fisher is not a critter you want to mess with. In a close contact situation like that, I think it scares me to death to think of Chuck firing that shot. If that kid would have sat up or moved wrong, he could have hit his own kid. But the alternative was terrible. If that kid would have actually woke up, that fisher probably would have done a heck of a number on that kid's face. Um, would have injured him very severely. I wouldn't even want to think about the damage that fisher could have done to that kid. So did Chuck do the right thing? Chuck himself says, I don't know if I did the right thing or not. He said, I did the only thing I could think of doing in the moment. And I think life is that way. We do a lot of things in the moment, and we just hope it's the best thing that we're doing. So there you go. There's a Sty story for you. And don't wake up now. So I'll catch you folks in another video. I'm glad you tagged along. I hope you enjoyed the story. And you all have a very nice day. Bye-bye.